Hello and welcome back to our Learn to Draft series, and this one we will continue our perfect curve for each champion, and we've left off with Kindred. Just as a quick reminder, we have these rules for the champion curves. The perfect term is of course a little bit relative because there is no one perfect curve for most champions, and this is of course always a little bit subjective. And my opinion on what I would go for is a little bit more geared towards expeditions. There are almost no epics, so if you want to make a deck work and construct it, you should look at some epics if they are worth including, for example. And it's of course my subjective opinion on these champions. You can definitely build another deck, definitely try to make other stuff work. And as a last thing, there will be no power level discussion. For example, right now a Jarvan would be much better than a Pyke. But that can be changed. This was for expeditions. For constructed, maybe an Aphelios would be much worse than a Ari cannon, but that might also change. So no power level discussion in these curves, just what I think would be the best possible curve, or one of the best possible curves for each champion. We left off with Kindred. I hope you enjoyed my Kindred run on Friday, and let's move on with Leona. Now Leona is one of the most boring champions design-wise or curve-wise, in my opinion. I don't mind her design-wise, like this stunning and stuff, but just this Daybreak means you just have to play a bunch of Daybreak cards, and there's no interesting ordering stuff happening with Nightfall, but most of the time you just want to go for the Daybreak curve. But of course Leona is also good as a standalone card, so if you don't build around the Leona, just have her in the deck as a stun. She's always good. The typical Daybreak curve would be Solari Soldier into Shield Bearer, into Priestess, into a level up Leona on turn 4. And then the key card for Leona is Ravun, allowing you to play all of the Daybreak cards, no matter how many in one turn. This is what It's Always Day for us means. And then we have Sunburst as a turn 6 play to just kill your opponent's win con, or you can start spreading around Zenith Blades, or go for a Morning Light kill afterwards. So pretty straightforward curve. There's also not that much you can do with this curve, other than when you deck build Leona, you just want to hit this curve and get a bunch of value. There's not really much you can you can change up with Leona, in my opinion. That's why I don't like her that much. She's definitely fine as a gameplay wise or power level wise, just not as interesting in my opinion. Maokai is next, and he is actually quite hard to figure out. I looked up like the fastest way to level up Maokai, and there was actually people who leveled him up on turn 4, I think, with some fancy Fading Memories combination. But I want to give a little bit more of a realistic way to level him up. First of all, he really likes Bilgewater, because half of the toss cards are in Bilgewater, and you are usually not getting there with just units dying. You have to have tossed cards as well for Maokai to flip over. And of course Maokai flip is pretty game winning most of the time. And you start off with the Drag Dredgers. Down here we counted, note that this is the toss 3, but then Sea Scarab comes in and Drag Dredgers trades off for something, dies, and this counts as two things. One, because Sea Scarab tosses, and as two, because Maokai also counts the units that have died. So we are now at 5 out of 25. Next time we play a Dead Bloom Wanderer, he also dies, and we go up to 10 out of 25. And then on turn 4 we play Maokai. On turn 5, we play another Drag Dredgers, and then play a Blighted Caretaker. On the Drag Dredgers, then we have like 2 Saplings, 3 Saplings in total, and our Caretaker, and our Sea Scarab on the board. So basically a full board with half Saplings, and then if all of this dies, we are at 22 out of 25 for Maokai level up. And then if you have like another Drag Dredger, then it would be enough to level him up completely by turn 5. And of course it requires 3 Drag Dredgers, but by the help of, for example, this card, Fading Memories, give you another Drag Dredgers. You can also use these Haunted Relics instead, or Wild Feast to trigger him, or even a Ravenous Budget to get extra hits on him. So there are definitely ways to make him work. He usually is just used as a support champion in Deep right now. You have this Deep game plan of just tossing yourself, and then if you at some point drop Maokai, it just helps you out, but you don't really build around him that much. In Expeditions, he's not really viable right now, because this is just so much combo stuff, and you just have too many little cards in your deck in Expeditions oftentimes. You just start with 30 cards, and yeah, not with 40 cards. So I found it definitely interesting that you can level up quite fast with just commons and uncommons and by turn 5, pretty realistically I would say. Next we have Nocturne, and Nocturne of course likes Targon. There are only like 4 Nightfall cards in Shadow Isles, so if you really want to build around Nightfall allies attacking, you want to be in Targon. This is a little bit of a criticism with him. Many people think he should just also trigger with fearsome units in general, but that might be too powerful. With Nightfall allies he's kind of limited to Targon, and he's also good as standalone. So if you just want to have a 4 mana, deal 5 damage, for example, that would be good enough. And this -1 -0 effect is also good in most decks, so you don't really have to build around him if you pick him up in expeditions. It's just good standalone as well. The best possible curve for Nocturne would be playing a Stygian Onlooker on turn 1 and attacking with him. Would give you a 1/5, then you would follow up with Diana on turn 2, and then with the help of Fading Memories, you would play 3 more Stygian Onlookers afterwards. This would level up your Diana and would give you the 5/5 attack if all of your units survived. And then on turn 4, you play a Deny Duskbringer. And on turn 5, when you get the tech token again, you would play Dusk Petal Dusk into Nocturne. And then maybe a onto Dusk onto Nocturne that also works, because he just gives everything -1 -0 again. And all your units have fearsome with him leveled up, so you will push in a lot of damage afterwards. Of course, this is not super realistically, but this is what a perfect curve would look like with Nocturne. Another curve I want to showcase, especially for expeditions, is the Mistwraith curve. The turn 1 bank, then you play Mistwraith, then Risen Mists. This is why this card costs 4 mana. And then a Wraithcaller afterwards, and then you play like 1-drop and Nocturne. This is one of the most powerful curves in expeditions in my opinion, because it's just so hard to deal with so many high power fearsome units. It's basically like Lurk and Constructed, but actually viable. So this is definitely something you have to watch out for if you face Nocturne in expeditions. It's way more likely than the Nightfall stuff. Okay, Pantheon we've already covered before. He is a little bit flexible, but of course you need this targeting stuff. You can play him with Demacia, with Shurima, with a bunch of different regions. And the best curve, I would say, is bank 1 mana turn 1, then turn 2 you play your Saga Seeker and a Pale Cascade for the 1/5, then you play a Rising Protector, bank 1 mana for a 2/5, then the Wounded White Flame plus Sharpsight 3/5, and Pantheon plus a Chain Vest as 4/5. And then your 5th turn or your 6th turn, you just play any spell and would flip your Pantheon over. Of course, this is just for Targon and Demacia. You just have to replace these things with other cards if you play him in other regions, but you definitely should aim for leveling him up by turn 5 or 6, or latest 7 or 8, otherwise it's just too late. Definitely want to go for targeting units each round with him. Poppy is next, and Poppy was nerfed twice, but I think she still is viable in expeditions and probably also constructed in like some Yordle lists. And of course, she's a mid-range champion, so you would want to curve into her usually. She's also flexible, so as long as you have like some small units she buffs up, she is totally fine to have. And the classic curve would be Yordle Squire into Bandle Commando, into Yordle Smith and Hungry Owlcat that was generated by Bandle Commando. And then the Poppy buffing up all of your units. But I actually prefer playing Poppy without Demacia and with another region. For example, if you take here a Legion Saboteur in Noxus, this would mean that the Yordles and Arms would just be active. We have Ionia, we have Demacia, we have Vandal City, and we have Noxus. And that's why I prefer Poppy with like other regions over the mono Bandle City version, just because Yordles and Arms is so much easier to activate. You want every Bandle Commando you get anyways, and once you get your Yordles and Arms on turn 5 with a Poppy on the board, you just basically win the game immediately. Like there's just no coming back from that. Pyke is another synergy champion. He really needs Shurima to work at all. We've tried different builds with Pyke, but just the mono Belgian Lurker support is not there. And the dream curve for Pyke would be like a Sharkling turn 1, triggering Lurk, then Scepter Swarm, triggering Lurk, then you go Xerath Caller, putting your Pyke on top of your deck, and then in turn 4 you play your Death from Below, summoning Pyke. Turn 5 you go for another Xerath Caller, predicting again, and if they try to target your Pyke down or kill him, then you just go for a Bone Skewer to make him survive and to not lose your Pyke. This would also probably level him up pretty fast. Renekton is a champion that is very, very flexible. He can go into multiple different archetypes and can just be played as a standalone card as well. Albeit he's not very good as a standalone card, just a 4/4/4, which is okay but not amazing. And my dream curve for Renekton would just be Blazer Simora turn 1, just dealing in some damage. And then Rockhopper with Rolling Sand, perfect card to make target vulnerable for Renekton. And Merciless Hunter following up, granting an enemy vulnerable again. Then you play Renekton and attack with him, and then you follow it up with a Siphoning Strike, basically leveling him up turn 5 immediately. And it doesn't really matter which order you do it, even if you attack on turn 4, you attack with Renekton, and then you Siphoning Strike some small guy, and this is then 6+4, and he will be leveled up immediately, which is quite strong. And if you have a leveled up Renekton on board, you just kill your opponent super fast. Rumble is quite interesting in that he's a dual region card. I've talked about Poppy before, but you can't really play Poppy in Mono Demacia. You can do like fancy rally stuff with Poppy Set, for example. But Rumble is actually viable in both Battle City and Noxus. He goes into both archetypes, so I'm going to provide you with 2 different curves. First of all, I would say he's pretty flexible. You want to have some stuff to discard with him, but otherwise you can build him in multiple different ways. It isn't just locked into one archetype. And the Bandit curve would start with Yordle Squire, giving you this tiny spear, for example. And Battle Commando giving you an Old Cat, and another Yordle Squire banking 2 mana. And then you will play Rumble, discarding the 3 cards you have created, not going down on card advantage, giving Spell Shield. And the big activator in Battle City for Rumble is Double Tap. Just playing a Double Tap will immediately level up Rumble, and when you play it in combat, he even gets this impact triggers. So that's quite strong. In Noxus, you would just go for the Reforge mechanic usually. You can also do this the PNC Noxus variation where you have like these fancy discard cards, and this would probably be even stronger, but that's not really viable in expeditions. So I would just go for the safe route with the Reforge mechanic, just summoning some Reforge cards, bank 3 mana, and on turn 4 I would go with the Rumble into like discarding survival skills, making my Rumble survive, and then the Whirling Death to level him up mid-combat as well. And this is kind of a constructed deck as well, with the Whirling Death, Rumble, play like Might, and of course PNC, discard some stuff instead. Have like the discard cards that are PNC, but that's really not viable in Expedition, so it's more of a streamlined curve. Okay, Shen follows up. And Shen is actually better as a support champion, so you can't really do a Shen build around. There just are too little cards working with barrier. There's only like 2 units that benefit from stuff getting barrier. And he really likes to support other cards and really likes Demacia or Shurima because you can then influence combat. Like in Demacia you have challengers, and Shurima you have vulnerables. So that's pretty good with Shen. And the best possible Shen curve for me would be banking turn 1, banking turn 2, and then running out a lower Prodigy, the cheap challenger unit. Then on turn 4 you go for Shen. Shen supports the lower Prodigy. Lower Prodigy challenges something. Then they try to block your Shen and try to kill him. But then you get to respond with a Prismatic Barrier on your Shen, which gives him a 2 out of 4 immediately. And then on the next turn you would just play a Golden Aegis on Shen and support your lower Prodigy again, which would then lead to him leveling up. So Golden Aegis is a really strong card, and you see why Shen works best with Demacia, because just most of the good barrier cards are in Demacia. Ionia has just 2 barrier cards, if I remember correctly. So yeah, but he's also pretty good as a standalone champion, just as a support champion, just works better with Demacia and Shurima. We've talked about Shyvana multiple times now through our series, and just saying it again, she's very flexible and also good as standalone champion. If you have no other dragons, she still poses a big threat that eventually levels up. And the dream curve for Shyvana would be Dragon Chow, Dragon Guard Lieutenant, Rune's Dragon Guard, Shyvana into the Screeching Dragon. And if you want to hear more about this curve, you should go back 2 episodes and watch my discussion about the Shyvana curve and about the game plan in general. Sivir is a quite interesting champion. She got buffed for no reason. Basically, she used to have level condition of 35 damage, which would actually kind of match with Sion. Now she got buffed to 30 damage, and this makes her just a very flexible champion. Every deck deals damage in some way, so you can easily level her up, and also makes her as a good standalone champion. If you really want to build around Sivir and make a Sivir deck, there are two approaches. First of all, the Mono Shurima curve would be like Treasure Seeker, Rockhopper, Merciless Hunter into Sivir, and then Rune Runner and Siphoning Strike, Boomerang Blade. This is also currently a constructed deck with Akshan, just having all of these good high value units and utilizing Sivir's quick attack to challenge out something. And of course, Siphoning Strike is really strong with the spell shield of Sivir. Same with Boomerang Blade, of course, although it's a little bit slow, but I love Boomerang Blade. If you go for a turbo level up, you have to pair it with Noxus. You would start with a Thrashing Snapper. He gets blocked, gets plus hits for 5 damage. Then another 5 attack unit, LeBlanc into Sivir, into like a Siphoning Strike, and that would be probably the most efficient and fastest way to level up Sivir. Then if you leveled up Sivir, a card that's really good with her is the Absolver, just giving Overwhelm to your whole board in combination with Spell Shield and Quick Attack is really, really insane. So that's what I would aim for, just a typical mid-range curve with your Sivir as the champion in between that just supports everything and levels up on turn 6-7 usually, and then makes a devastating attack. Tahm Kench is unbenched, and actually I've forgotten to include Soraka in my first video, not if anybody noticed, but here she goes. Soraka is basically paired with Tahm Kench because Tahm Kench really needs Targon, and there are like some meme combinations with Freljord and Frostbites or with Shurima, but in general Tahm Kench really wants to be built with Targon, and the slower curve would be starting with Krusty Codger, who's starting out damaged, then Star Spring, the main win condition of the deck, into like a Fortune Cooker damaging Krusty Codger again, then Tahm Kench on 4 into Soraka, healing up your Tahm Kench after you've eaten something, or just healing up your other units, progressing Star Spring, and this would also level up Soraka pretty quickly. Like you heal 1 here, then you heal 2 here, and then when you attack, Soraka would already be leveled up. And the little bit slower curve would be to bank 1 mana and then play a Boxtopus. Actually the faster curve, not the slower curve. You play Boxtopus turn 2, then you play Soraka on turn 3, basically attacking with a 3-4 Boxtopus, challenging away anything that could kill Soraka. And afterwards you play Tahm Kench turn 4, and on turn 5 you still have this 1 Spellbank mana, so you would go for the Acquired Taste. If your opponent is like, haha, Vengeance, haha, Concerted Strike, you would just either follow up with Astral Protection or Bastion, and just protect your Tahm Kench, and once you've eaten the first unit, then got your Soraka attack again, then you basically can't lose anymore because Tahm Kench just generates so much value, and you also have your second win condition of Star Spring. It's a little bit of a gimmicky deck, only works together most of the time, and this is the Soraka Tahm Kench archetype basically. Taric is a little bit hard to figure out. He is flexible in a way, he needs these targeting spells to be good, but there are multiple regions in Shurima again, in Noxus, Targon, so a bunch of different options for him to go for. And the most important thing is that he needs spell mana on attack. If you ever have like you're carving out 1, 2, 3, 4 into Taric, you have no spell mana open, it's just pretty terrible. Because on turn 4, you want to really activate this effect of the copy the last spell, because that means you cast him on him, then he sees himself being supported or targeted with supported allies, so then he basically goes up to a 3 out of 7 immediately, and that's really important for his level up, otherwise it just gets a 1 out of 7, and that's making him really slow and inefficient. So you really want to bank up some spell mana on your attack. If it's turn 5 when you attack, that's a little bit easier, but once you attack on turn 4, you really have to plan your curve out and reserve some mana for your Taric attack. And the 3 spells in Targon that work with Taric are the Gem for 1, it's like the weakest effect, Pale Cascade as some kind of card advantage, and the most risky play would be Zenith Blade. Of course your opponent can then just Vengeance your Taric in response, and you don't get the attack in. That's the advantage of the focus and burst cards, but this would be the most powerful effect to draw 2 Zenith Blades, or 1 Zenith Blade I guess, and buff up your units. And the 2 ways I would curve into Taric is by playing like a nothing on turn 1, nothing on turn 2, and then I really like Gift Giver into Lunari Shadestalker. The Sparklefly tends to be a little bit too slow in my experience, and Shadestalker just turning into a 4-5 for example, or a 3-5 I guess, would still be a really strong card as an elusive, and you can buff him up again or her up again with the gem and just have a really powerful elusive attacker. The other option would be turn 1 Saga Seeker, turn 2 Mountain Goat, and then bank 3 mana. But the most important thing with playing Taric is you need the spell mana on the attack, and you need to, in the best case, also have a way to protect your Taric. For example, if you have a Glory Seeker, try to challenge your Taric, you can then pay Cascade, make him survive. That's just really, really strong. 2 cards that work pretty well with him are Golden Aegis, first of all. Any rally effect that targets, now also Relentless Pursuit, you can target them with Relic, Taric with the Rally, and then once you attack, Taric will copy the Golden Aegis onto its neighbor, and then will rally again, so you get to attack twice for 1 rally basically. That's really strong. And then also Boomerang Blade works with Taric, so you Boomerang Blade with Taric, he kills 2 units and he attacks, and the neighbor also will strike down 2 units, which is a really, really high value play, basically destroys your whole opponent's board. So also quite a cool synergy in 2 different regions here. And of course, a very good support card for Taric would be Mountain Sojourners. If you attack on 5, you curve these units into Taric, into Mountain Sojourners, into some kind of buff, and then you attack with a 4-7 +2/+2 6-9 Taric on turn 5. That's just insane. And also this big buffed up unit next to him. So definitely a card to keep out for, definitely a card that is a little bit underrated right now. Twisted Fate is design-wise one of my favorite champions. I just really like these card shuffling effects, and he just really cool personality, I would think. Unfortunately, I can't really play him in League, but I really like him as a design. He's better as a support champion right now. The typical draw some cards with burst spell stuff doesn't really work out that well after the nerfs, especially not in expeditions. So in expeditions, you never want to pick a card or Rummage, usually. Like Rummage has some corner cases, pick a card you never want to pick up. And instead, Twisted Fate is just better as a support champion, and you play mostly for the red card, which is really powerful with Barrel, for example, dealing 2 damage to all enemies, and the gold card, just a support effect, stunning the biggest unit, delaying a little bit, or sniping an important target. The dream curve for Twisted Fate, in my opinion, would just be Fractured Corsair into turn 1, and turn 2 you attack Black Market Merchant, nab 1, into the Troll Hunters, it's just an all-around good card, then Twisted Fate, like red card. What this curve does is Troll Hunters makes them not play a big card, because the Troll Hunters would just kill it, so they will play 2 small cards, and then your Twisted Fate can clean up those small cards with the red card. And afterwards, I would just go for the Fortune Croakers. This is like the best way to level up Twisted Fate. Just having this incidental card draw on replaceable units, and not just these all-in card draw effects. And then once he's close to leveling up, if they ignore him for some reason, you can go for the Burst Speed, Pilfered Goods, or Salvage. Twisted Fate's level up also works on nab, which is important to realize. And this is why I included this Black Market Merchant, just refueling your hand. And this is a very decent mid-rangey to late game strategy, just having infinite resources outdrawing. Kinda loses hard to puff caps, but every strategy has a weakness. Veigar is currently one of my favorite decks to play in Constructed. I loved Darkness when it came out, but it wasn't that strong back then because there were just stronger decks. Now it's actually viable, and I enjoy playing it. He is best as both Bandle City and Shadow Isles, so just having the combination of both would be the best option for him. And the dream curve would be to use 1 mana early on, either for a group shot or a go hard. This is more of a constructive thing. But for example, a group shot is very strong with Veigar because of this curve continuing with the Twisted Catalyzer. This is basically the strongest card as a darkness deck, just giving this darkness extra damage. And if you ever reach like 4 to 5 damage on your darkness, you basically have won the game. In most matchups, then opponent just gets killed over and over again. So getting this darkness power up is really important, and Twisted Catalyst is your 2-drop of choice in these scenarios. Then what I like to do is bank 3 mana on turn 3 and go into the Veigar turn 4, and this leaves me open with either the darkness, so immediately can shoot something for 3 damage if I need to, or I can, if they try to kill my Veigar, go for Stress Defense or Mist's Call. Stress Defense currently not in expeditions, but maybe it comes sooner. And Mist's Call really strong because then your Veigar survives. They like bank up 6 mana, vengeance your Veigar, and then your Mist's Call, it comes back. It's worse against aggressive decks, of course. But then the curve would be continuing with Senna and the Ixtali Sentinel. Note that it's not important to spend all of your darkness all the time against most matchups. If you're playing against an aggressive deck, it's way better to just run out the units here and basically have like the Senna out, even if you don't get another darkness, just having this fast speed. Ixtali Sentinel is really, really good, just running her out. And I won a lot of matchups like Burn, for example, where I just played Ixtali Sentinel on turn 6, Ixtali Sentinel on turn 7, and no darkness at all. Just having this 4-5 lifesteal is so strong. It's basically a Radiant Guardian without any conditions, so this definitely wins you a lot of matchups. There are of course other matchups where you want to use every bit of value you have, but this would be a prime example of value versus board control and just playing out your units. Generally, I would say it's totally not wrong to play out some of your darkness generators as long as it has a purpose. Viktor is another interesting champion. He's very good standalone and is better as a support champion. I don't really like playing around him with these graded cards and going all in into this augment theme. This is just not as strong. The most important thing to consider with Viktor is that you want to have 1 spell mana on turn 4, because you want to play Viktor and immediately play the Hex Core upgrade. This is very important. If you just play Viktor without this upgrade, he just stays at 2-4 and gets killed very more easily. With the upgrade, he goes up to a 3-4 with a random keyword, for example, Space Shield or something. It's actually pretty hard to kill a Viktor on turn 4 efficiently. For 4 mana, for example, it's not possible. On 5, you can just get hooked by a Screeching Dragon, so that would be unfortunate. But on turn 4, this is very efficient. And one way to achieve this would be to go Gift Giver on turn 1. I usually like pairing Viktor with Targon, because Targon has a lot of created cards in the Invoke mechanics. But you can of course play another 1-drop. Then Ballistic Bot into Ballistic Bot, banking 1 spell mana and then going for the Hex Core upgrade afterwards. Another advantage of the being in Targon would be the following scenario. On turn 5, opponent didn't kill it. Turn 5, you put your Hex Core upgrade on the stack. Then your opponent is like, haha, now I have enough mana for my ultimate destruction card. And then aims it at the Viktor. But then you have 4 mana left over, because it's turn 5, and can play either Bastion or Astral Protection to save Viktor. And once he has 2 keywords, he's pretty likely to roll Space Shield again. And oftentimes your opponent just has 1 answer for Viktor, and not 2 or 3. Now that with this Ballistic Bots, you don't really want to play these Ignitions, unless it serves like a value for like Plunder, for example. But if you play them in the early game, before turn 5, it's oftentimes just a waste of resources, a waste of mana. You generally want to either play them if you have nothing better to do, or wait until turns 6 onward to really start throwing out these Ignitions. Xerath got recently buffed and is now actually viable in Constructed, so we finally got a good curve for him. And the best curve that was found for Xerath would be Ancient Preparations turn 1 into a Rockhopper. And what you then do is just pass and bank 3 mana. And then on turn 4 you play Xerath with the Unraveled Earth. So otherwise the advice would be to just play Unraveled Earth first, but if you wait to develop Xerath first and then Unraveled Earth, or like you can do it the other way around of course, Unraveled Earth into Xerath on turn 4, basically 1 action because it's the burst speed spell, then your opponent is like a little bit of a problem because they have to play units, but if they play units then your Xerath shoots them, and because you have destroyed 2 landmarks before that, he will be leveled up and shoots another thing for 3 damage. This just makes it really, really awkward for your opponent to develop and to be efficient. And then once he's leveled up, you can also play Herald of the Magus to give him +2/+2 and overwhelm everywhere or your other champions, and have a Ancient Hourglass to protect Xerath. This would be just the dream curve. Because all of these cards give you something else other than destroying landmarks. This gives you a 2/2, this gives you a 3/1, and this draws you a card. So you don't just play landmarks, you play actual good cards with landmarks attached to them, which is way more efficient. Yasuo was probably the biggest slide to collect, so brace yourselves. He is, first of all, good standalone. So a 4-mana 4/4 quick attack in Expeditions is very, very good standalone. You can definitely throw a 4-mana 4/4 quick attack into every deck and he will perform well, because he just is so hard to deal with in combat. He can't be dealt 3 damage to. And if you want to build on Yasuo, you want him with Noxus, Targon, or Panel City. Usually those are like the intended pairings where stuns live and recoils live. And if you want to turbo level Yasuo, I would go for the recoil route. And again, showcased already with Ari and Cannon, I would just go for the Morn combination. You play Morn turn 1, attack, recoil it. Turn 2 you play 2 Morn, then you attack again, recoil them, and play them again. On turn 4 you have your Yasuo, and then you can on turn 5 just attack with your Morn again and level them up with the double recoil. If you want a more less combo-y version of leveling up, I would always go for the units that also have spells attached to them. So for example, the Conspirator is a 2/2 elusive that recoils an ally, levels up Yasuo. So like Sanok, 2/3, stuns a unit. Arachnid Sentry is one of the rows, 3/2, 5/1, stuns a unit. What you don't want to do is playing cards like Steel Tempest. Like Steel Tempest is such a bad card, you don't really get any value out of it unless your Yasuo is on the board. So you want to avoid those cards, you want to have stuns on units and not just on spells usually. And once you level up Yasuo, which is easily possible by turn 4, or not easily, but it's possible by turn 4, then you go for one of the big finisher cards, which would be a Noxus Intimidating Roar, just stunning all enemies with 4 or less power. Then we have the Sneaky Sibyls in Targon, one of the weakest payoffs, but at least it comes with a unit. And then the new Event Horizon in Battle City, also stunning your opponent's units. A little bit weird because there's no other stun cards in Battle City except for Cannon, but it exists. And afterwards you can go for Minotaur Reckoner in Noxus, just stunning all of the enemies, or the Windsinger for a recoil, and curve out into Yoni and Mina Swiftfoot afterwards. So Yasuo is definitely this big combo guy, where you have your powerful turn, wipe your opponent's board, make a screenshot, post it on the internet, and are happy about it. But the main problem with this deck is not Yasuo being too weak, but you not drawing Yasuo. So if you play around Yasuo, have all of these weird stun cards in your deck, don't draw Yasuo, your deck kinda doesn't have anything to do, really. But that's just the inherent problem. And it's actually, in my opinion, good that Yasuo isn't that strong, because it would be pretty oppressive to play against. Gangplank got recently nerfed to a 5/4 instead of a 5/5. With a 5/5 I would have said he's good standalone. Now as a 5/4 he's just significantly weaker. And I would say he's flexible. Main goal you have in mind is to deal damage each round for 5 consecutive rounds to enemy nexus, then he levels up. And a level up Gangplank attack usually wins you the game, no matter if it's constructed or expeditions. And I'm going to go for 2 scenarios how to achieve this dealing damage 5 different rounds. And actually this curve would be similar for Sejuani. So Sejuani didn't actually make a separate part for it, because Sejuani has the same level up condition and also wants to deal damage each round. And this is basically the same for him or her. Sejuani is a girl. So on odds, the attacks would be Dragshot Corsair on turn 1, and you attack with him. And then on turn 2 you play a Make It Rain. It will most likely damage Nexus, because they will just have 2 units on the board at most. Then you play attack again, play your Black Market Merchant and bank 1 mana. Then on turn 4 you go for the Yordle Grifter, creating you this Warning Shot in your hand and a Parley. Then on turn 5 you use this warning shot and then play your leveled up Gangplank. This would be the odds curve. And on the evens you would start with warning shot Jagged Butcher. There is no other way to do damage turn 1 in this game other than parley and expedition and warning shot. So this will just have to be the turn 1 curve you attack on evens. Then you have your Crackshot Corsair play attack with Jagged Butcher and play another Jagged Butcher on turn 2. On turn 3 you play Naked Rain, and from that point onwards you would proceed with turn 4 over here and turn 5 Gangplank. And if you want to play around Shyvana, I would also, if you want to level her up as fast as possible, would advise you the same curve, playing in Bilgewater, and the failure side of Shyvana, or the failure in general, doesn't have these direct damage spells. Failure doesn't have any way to do damage turn 1, so it's just very hard to level up Shyvana otherwise. The big win condition in late game is of course the Dreadway. This will be the big finisher for your deck, and you can pick it up in Expeditions, always do, because it's just a very powerful card, and in Constructed this is just like the card you're working for. This leads us to Garen, and Garen has no build around. He's the most simple champion in the game. He is just a 5-5 with striking twice, a level up condition. There's a lot of ways to strike twice with like rallies, Darius, etc. So instead of just going for this striking synergy in Garen, I just want to showcase the best possible elite curve I could figure out. You pass turn 1, then you play a Battlesmith, and then on turn 3 you play a Succession with Spell Mana and Sivir of Cloudfield in elite. Then you go for the Bannerman, buffing up your 3 units. Then you play your Garen. And then you can either continue with like just leveling up Garen with a Concerted Strike, for example, or continue the perfect elite curve with a Sivir the Bold turn 6, into Silvering Vanguard, Vanguard Reamer on turn 7, into Reinforcements turn 8, and then later on Sivir Lady of Clouds. This would be the perfect elite curve in my opinion. Of course you can have 3 Battlesmiths instead, that like with different cards in your deck. This would be like a perfect curve. Heimer is one of my favorite champions to play, and especially in Lab of Legends, because you can just play so many cards with him, and it's just really fun for me to play him. He's pretty flexible, and the main thing you want to do is having 3 spell mana on turn 5 and you play your Heimerdinger. Because the big build around with Heimerdinger is you want to play Heimerdinger and then continue playing Flash of Brilliances in multiples, so like 3 Flash of Brilliances straight up. This will refill your spell mana each time and will on burst speed give you immediate value, which is really strong with Heimerdinger, because of course your opponent knows you play Heimerdinger and they will try to kill him. You have no real way to protect him in PNC, so you just have to make sure he survives somehow, or you get value before he dies. A perfect curve for this would be like Forge Fiend turn 1, bank 1 spell mana, then Eager Apprentice, refill 2 spell mana, then any 3-drop. I actually think Golden Crushpot would work in this curve because it's attack now. And on turn 4 you play either the Gotcha if they play a big card, or a Static Shock if they have like small cards. Still have 3 spell mana banked up, and go into Heimerdinger, 3 Flash of Brilliances, maybe a Mystic Shot, just generate 4 units immediately. And afterwards you just go for the Shock Blast or any 6-cost spell you generated, and follow this up with double Hextech Handler, buffing your tech allies, so your turrets and your Golden Crushpot everywhere by +2, +1, +1. Fortunately this card and the Forge Chief are not in Expeditions yet, but maybe in the future this will be a very viable curve. Karma is interesting in that she just wants to get to 10 mana. Basically doesn't matter what curve you play before. If you get to turn 10 with Karma, you just basically win oftentimes, or have a really good big advantage. And another thing you have to know with Karma is that she always needs a second region, so there are no good spells in Leona to copy for her, like literally none. And like you can heal, you can draw, but otherwise you need a second region to win with Karma. And as an example curve, I want to just showcase Karma with Shadow Isles, because it was like a recurring archetype. For example, you go for a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, just some aggro stoppers and card draw. Then on turn 4 you go for a Vile Feast, banking 2 mana. Turn 5 you deploy your first Karma. She of course threatens to give you value over time, so your opponent will try to kill her. Then you protect her with Twin Disciplines. and afterwards your opponent still manages to kill her somehow on turn 6, then you just Vengeance, Retaliate afterwards, and then on turn 7 you play a Rekindler, resummoning your Karma. On turn 8 your opponent tries to kill her again, but you deny and Mill of Ionia, like Challenger for example. On turn 9 they try to kill you instead, so you go for a Withering Veil and a Concussive Palm just to survive, and on turn 10 your Karma levels up and you basically win the game from that point. Just casting each spell 2 times is really really strong. For example, Withering Veil dealing 2 and healing 6. This summoning 2 Dragonlings or Dragon guys, Tail of the Dragon. So basically the main point is you want to get to 10 mana, want to have a consistent game plan and stuff to do up to 10 mana, and then win the game with some kind of spell combination with Karma. We've also talked about Lux multiple times now. Her ideal curve would be this one with the bank 1, bank 3, and then Remembrance, activating all of your Mage Seeker cards. Turn 2, on turn 4 you play the Mage Seeker Persuader, bank 2 cards, bank 2 mana, and go for the Lux plus single combat. But first of all, Lux is good standalone. You will eventually cast 6 mana of spells in any deck possible, so you will just level up eventually and will be good alone. And the reason why this curve is so good is because on turn 6 you can either play a 6-cost spell, but because you already have invested 2 mana into your Lux in the turn before, you can also play just one of the good 5-cost spells. So you don't have to have a 6-cost spell. For example, the opponent tries to kill her, you can detain a unit, or you can detain Lux to prevent her from being killed. Or they try to challenge her, you go for a Concerted Strike, get another Final Spark, and basically once you generated 2 Final Sparks, the game is basically over. Or like if you level up with a 5-cost spell. Quinn is a champion I've recently played a lot more. I used to not really like her, but now she's actually viable and constructed and also always pretty good in expeditions. And actually really fun to play with this card mechanic. So she's good standalone and also pretty flexible. Like you want to attack multiple times, but as long as you have some scouts and some kind of protection, you can work in any archetype. The best Quinn curve I could imagine would be Fleet Feather Tracker turn 1 into Blinding Assault turn 2 and then bank 3 spell mana. Then you go for a Grizzled Ranger turn 4, basically this deployable scout unit that you don't really mind giving up. Then you play Quinn on turn 5, then they might try to kill her and you respond with a Prismatic Barrier, Sharp Side, etc., single combat. Then you scout attack, and then you normally attack, and you really like having like a secondary scout attack card for in case it's not working out with Quinn that well. And then on turn 6 you would go for a Golden Aegis and have one of these 2 spells as backup, basically leveling up your Quinn on turn 6 this way. And once again, these scout units that are deployable are really good with Quinn because you sometimes don't want to get her into combat immediately. You want to preserve her health total, and having these other scout units is really strong for that. Senna is basically the same as Veigar with her curve. She's also best as Bandit City and Shadow Isles, but Senna is way more flexible as Veigar because Veigar just requires you this darkness stuff. Senna just requires you to slay units or even have your illusion die, which rarely happens. But just slaying units is very easy as you can play Senna in multiple different combinations. The most reliable, the most common for her is still in the typical darkness curve, although I really like playing a Withering Veil on turn 5 or 6 instead, because this just slays oftentimes 3 units on its own if you set it up correctly, and then insta-level Senna, and once Senna levels up, her whole deck just functions so much better. Swain is a champion that requires a lot of build around, so you can't just put your Swain into your deck and be like, haha, I have a 3-6 now, I win. That's not how Swain works. You really need to have this deal 12 non-combat damage, and the main way you do that in Constructed is with spells. So you play a Ravenous Flock, deal 4 damage, Nocturne Fervor, deal 6 damage, Avalanche oftentimes deals 12 damage immediately, and it's really hard to do that with units. That's why Swain is not that good in expeditions. You can't just bank on Avalanche being strong, on Ravenous Flock being active. It's more of a Constructed thing. The best curve I would have for a Swain level up with units is you play a Crimson Bloodletter turn 1 and a Imperial Definitionist turn 2. This will give you 4 non-combat damage. Then you do the same thing again for 8 non-combat damage. Then you play a Crimson Awakener on all of these units with another 4 non-combat damage, and this will be 12 out of 12 and would level up your Swain afterwards. So if you really wanted to make Swain work in Expeditions, I would go for this curve, move into like the Crimson stuff and pick up a bunch of Nocturne Fervors, but it's really hard to do. Of course, in Constructed he's quite strong because he also has the Leviathan. This is like the big late gaming condition that's just really impactful and important for Swain to be able to work properly with the damage each time. And because we don't have that in Expeditions, Swain is just weaker. Taliyah is another one of these landmark champions which has a pretty straightforward curve. She actually has the same starting curve as Xerath with Preparations, Rockhopper, and then a Rebel Earth on turn 3. This will give you 4 landmarks summoned. And afterwards, on turn 4, you can go for the Salt Spires, for example. This is a pretty good target to copy with Taliyah. Will be activated. And on turn 5, you play Taliyah, get another Salt Spires, and both of them activate, and Taliyah is leveled up. This is a pretty good landmark curve for her. Then afterwards, you can play Herald of the Magus or an Ancient Hourglass to protect your Taliyah. It's like this infinite combo with Taliyah where you have Ancient Hourglass on Taliyah, then copied with another Taliyah, which ends up with 3 Taliyahs on the board, and this leads to your opponent not being able to play any spells on this deck. So a really powerful combination with the Hourglass and multiple Taliyahs. Thresh is another champion that's best as a support champion. He doesn't really have any build around, he's just about these 6 units dying and doesn't really have any fancy synergies going on. So he's better as a support champion. His whole purpose is to bring out another champion from your deck. He used to be played with Viego, with Narcissus, Aurelion Sol, Karma, just basically searching your deck for one of these high value champions. So he doesn't really have a build around, just have to have stuff die. And how I like to achieve this win condition is by just going for the good units on its own. So the Aristocrat and Cursed Keeper to like a Caretaker, Spirit Leech afterwards, and then you play your Thresh, and then just continue playing Glimpse Beyond, spell Caretakers, and basically play a bunch of good units, remove your opponent's units, draw some cards, while also having units die, and your Thresh survives, and combat happens, so your Thresh will eventually level up and pull out your good champion from your deck. But you can't for example, if you go for Thresh, that would just be terrible. If you go mono Thresh, you always have to have a good support or another champion you want to build around. But Thresh helps get into play when needed. Trundle, once again, is a champion that doesn't really have a build around and is good standalone. You might say, but wait, the 8 cost Behold mechanics, and I tell you these are just bad, and nobody wants, like the 2 mana 4/3 for example, it's just unplayable. Nobody ever played it and will ever play it. And the 3 mana 3/5 regeneration is okay-ish, but I wouldn't call it a build around. And most of the time you just play Trundle as a standalone card, or because of the Ice Pillar, or the Field Rush, for example, he's played in Constructed because he just has Overwhelm as a champion and is in Freljord, but you don't really build around Trundle as a card. If you wanted to make a Trundle deck, I would go for bank 1 mana turn 1, bank 1 mana or 2 mana turn 2. And then of all of this 6 mana, you play a Catalyst of Eons, still having 1 mana up. And then on turn 4, you play a Trundle, so it comes down 1 turn earlier. Then on turn 5, you have 6 mana or 7 mana with the 1 spell mana, so you can go for an Avalanche plus a Troll Chant, for example, making your Trundle survive. Then you have still 1 spell mana backed up. Then you go for the Ice Quake on turn 6 or turn 7. It's turn 6 because you ramped up 1, have 7 mana and play Ice Quake. And on turn 7, you have 8 mana. And you can go for the Ice Pillar level up into like a Ipted Stairs and just destroying all of the other units. And this would be the best Trundle curve I would come up. But usually you would just want to play him as a standalone card in just a mid-range Freljord deck, not really building around him or around ramping. Another champion that's good as a standalone card and has no build around is Vi. Once again, there's just no real synergies going on, just having you Vi in your hand and playing other stuff. Doesn't really have any build-around applications. You can turbo level Vi if you want, it's not even that hard, but most of the time in both Constructed and Expeditions she was just run as a 5-mana removal spell, 5-mana deal 8 to 10 damage, or just, basically that was her role for her existence. If you want to build around Vi, if you want to make a Vi deck, you have to try to level her up on turn 5 when she comes down. The way you do this is by playing a 1-drop, then playing a 2-drop, for example Eager Apprentice plus Mystic Shot. Doesn't really have to be Eager Apprentice, you can just play another card that generates another card, that's free, or play 2 1-drops. Then you play a Poro Cannon, playing out your 2 Daring Poros, and then you play 2 2-drops, and your Vi is leveled up by turn 5. So a pretty flexible curve. Just want to have, for example, Poro Cannon, you want to have a lot of cheap stuff, some multiple 1-drops. If you replace this with a 2-drop and then play another 1-drop in this turn 3, this also works out. But usual, I just would say just not build around Vi, put it in a deck as a good champion and play different strategies as your main strategies. Viego is pretty powerful. I have underestimated Viego pretty much because he's really, really good if he sticks around, if your opponent doesn't have an answer. He's quite strong, and I would say he's flexible, but also as good as a standalone card, just sticking around on the board and summoning these encouraging mists over and over again just makes him good as a single card, and he's pretty flexible in how you want to achieve this level up with your allies dying. I will just showcase Mono Shadow Isles here. You start with a 1-drop and a 2-drop, and then you play your Cameroon Soldier, summoning these encouraging mists. This Cameroon Soldier is really, really important because with 4 damage you can actually kill Viego. If he's a 6-5, he's very, very harder to kill. And what I like to do is then on turn 4 either play another Cameroon Soldier or go for the Chronic Love rune, destroying Cameroon Soldier, bringing it back, and then summoning Viego into a Spirit Leech, for example, triggering Viego again. And then if he dies, you play a Rekindler. If he survives, you play a Invasive Hydra Vine. And just make your Viego grow over and over again until he flips. And at some point when he's like gigantic, you just play an Atrocity and kill your opponent. This is like the typical Viego game plan. Vladimir is another pretty straightforward champion who's also good standalone. Basically, most of your units will survive damage at some point, and this is just a very common level up to achieve at some point, and he's just a 5-5 which is Nexus damage and turns into a 6-6 regeneration at some point. So, good standalone. If you want to build around him, the way to level him up on turn 5 would be Crimson Bloodletter into Imperial Demolitionist. This would mean 2-5 again, and then you play a Crimson Curator into a Crimson Awakener, dealing damage to all of your other units, and having him leveled up by turn 5, and dealing damage to units again. These 2 would die, this one gains another card, this one stays alive, and this is just the best possible Vladimir draw, I would say. Another good card with Vladimir is the Scargrounds. This is the main application from Constructed, where you want to pick up Freljord and the Scargrounds, which makes his damaging effect first of all not punishing because you have Tough, and also gives you another benefit with the +1/+0. Anivia is next, and similar to Karma, she's just self-sufficient. She just wants to get to 10 mana and wins you the game afterwards. So you can build multiple different strategies around her and have no real one curve you want to lock in. I generally don't like the ramp strategy because ramping just isn't that strong in most formats, and there's stronger stuff you can ramp into. I just like playing a normal game with Anivia. And of course you can construct it, play her with Shadow Eyes, Full Control, and Rekindlers and stuff. If you play Mono Freljord, you would just go for bank 1 mana turn 1, bank 1 mana turn, or bank turn 2, and then play a Catalyst of Eons, so ramping into an Avalanche on turn 4. Then you play your Anivia on turn 5, clean up everything that the Avalanche didn't kill. Then you just stall out the game with Harsh Winds until you play It That Stares on turn 8, and turn 9 you survive somehow, turn 10 Anivia flips, and then you win the game of her repetitive damage and unkillability. Another curve that's pretty common in Expeditions is the Yeti curve. This also lives in both Anivia card pools, so if you face Anivia in Expeditions you will see this a lot. This would be Yeti Healing turn 1 into bank 2 mana turn 2, into Tall Tales. If you in response try to kill the Yeti yearling, they will have a troll chant saving your yearling. And then you will have this 5/5 and play a Ancient Yeti on turn 4. If you keep this in the opening hand, there's 1, 2, 3 round ends, so he costs 4 mana. And you're just faced with these multiple 5/5s on turn 4, which is also quite a strong strategy. Darius is once again a champion that has no build around. Like, he's pretty simple, just deal damage to your opponent's nexus and then I level up and kill him. So if you just want to do that, I'm just going to show the typical Noxus curve again. Legion Rearguard into Glory Seeker, into Rearguard Hopeful, into Basilisk Rider, into like a Ancient Warmonger, and then you play your Darius. Hopefully your early game curve has dealt enough damage to put him at like 8 or 5, and your Darius would finish off the game. If you want to build around Darius, 2 cards that are good to pick up are Whirling Death and Decisive Maneuver. You will have a lot of Overwhelm units, so Decisive Maneuver is quite strong with the stun, because if you stun a blocked unit or a blocking unit, then the Overwhelm still goes through and damages. Same with Whirling Death, you just shoot the unit away, and this will finish the game oftentimes. So 2 really strong cards to pick up if you want to make Darius work, but there's no real build around to showcase with him. Now things get interesting again with Hecarim. Hecarim is one of my favorite champions to play. He just feels so powerful and does a lot of stuff. 6 mana 5/6 Overwhelm with these Battle Riders. It's just really, really good as a standalone card and just a finisher. I don't really know why not more decks just play Hecarim as just like a standalone card without ephemeral synergies and stuff. And if you want to go for synergies for leveling him up, he really likes Ionia and Shurima as pairings. So the typical or the best possible Hecarim curve would be like bank 1 mana turn 1, then play a Soul Shepherd. This is one of the big activators, also blocks 1 unit, like a 2/2 for example, and buffs up all of your ephemeral allies, just dealing so much more damage. Then I would go for a Shark Chariot, combining that with a Haunted Relic for attack on turn 3 of course. This would give me a bunch of ephemeral units, basically 10 power worth of stats on turn 3, that's attacking. Then turn 4 I would just play a random unit and bank 2 mana. Just like the defensive turns are the weakest turns for ephemeral curves. Then on turn 5 you play another Shark Chariot, Blighted Caretaker. If your Soul Shepherd survives, this will bring back 2 Saplings plus 2 Shark Chariots, which is pretty insane. And this alone will level up your Hecarim. So this is 8 ephemeral units attacking, and Shark Chariot is like your prime card if you want to build around ephemerals. If you don't find Shark Chariots, your deck will be pretty terrible. So this is like, if you want to build ephemerals, you need at least 2 or 3 Shark Chariots to make it work, in my opinion. Once you've done that, turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 is pretty good if you are not attacking Hecarim immediately, because turn 6 your pawn will have the action first. So they will be like, turn 6 I will just play my 3/3, my 4/4, whatever, and then you can play Hecarim. And if they don't do that, you just pass. If they like pass to you weirdly, then you just pass and play Hecarim turn 7. And he will be leveled up already. And big problem with Hecarim is he goes to the left side, so all of the units get buffed on the right side, but if they kill Hecarim in some way, then all of the units lose the buffs again. So some good support cards of Hecarim are Twin Disciplines, just making him survive. And then Syncopation is amazing. You basically switch Hecarim from the left side to the right side, so all of the other combat happens first before Hecarim gets damaged and dies. Syncopation, really, really strong card of Hecarim. And Ancient Hourglass and Shurima just also helps you survive. And yeah, there's no real streamlined ephemeral curve, of course, but I think getting these Shark Chariots out is really, really key for any ephemeral deck. We're almost at the end. Jarvan is next. Jarvan, once again, a pretty good standalone champion, which is also flexible. You just want to have these allies survive strikes from blockers, which is a little bit sophisticated way of saying you want to challenge your opponent's enemies and survive, or you want to have them block favorably, have their combat tricks and stuff. There are multiple different ways to achieve this, and once he's leveled up, he basically wins you the game. The dream curve for him in Mono Demacia would be Pantheon Squire turn 1, creating you this banner, of course, then Pantheon Squire banking 1 on turn 2, so you have 2 banners in hand now. Then you play 1 banner plus Horned Lord on turn 3, and you play another banner and Gallant Rider on turn 4, and then you have already these 2 will survive and they challenge something, and then you play a Screeching Dragon and open attack and get your flipped Jarvan into battle. this would be my curve to aim for if you want to make the best possible Jarvan deck happen in Mono Demacia. Nasus, our big dog, is also pretty flexible because you just have this slay mechanic going on, so you have many different ways to combine him. You can play Mono Shurima, you can play him with Noxus and Lois Seekers, for example, and most of the time he likes Shadow Isles, but there's multiple different ways to make him work. You have to play him on turn 6, you can play him in the late game as well, when he has farmed up more. The best possible curve for him would be like turn 1 Maokai Reaper. This card is amazing, just getting these stats over and over again. Then turn 2 Rockhopper, turn 3 Merciless Hunter, turn 4 Maokai Sandspinner, basically giving vulnerable, slaying units over and over again. Turn 5 Rampaging Maokai. It's easily possible to achieve 4 slays here if you attack with these vulnerables. One will have to trade something to Maokai Reaper at some point, so you will have this active by turn 5. And then you play Nasus turn 6, and turn 7 you would combine Siphoning Strike with Ruthless Predator to get the Nasus level up at this point. If you have 4 here, it would be 6. Then you would Ruthless Predator, for example, challenge down on something small. And then you go for the Siphoning Strike first, or you combine those two. Then he goes to 10, and then he challenges, and then he levels up by turn 7. Of course, this is way more efficient with Shadow Eyes, but this is the Mono Shurima version. Okay, almost at the end, just a few champions left. Malphite here, 7 mana, 6/10 tough, and he's a person who really likes Shurima, because many of the landmarks live in Shurima. Most Targon landmarks are really terrible. You don't want to play them. The optimal curve for like Targon only would be bank 1 mana, turn 1, then play a Blue Sentinel, play Rockfall Path, chip. Generally, you don't want to run out your chip while it's still a 1/1. If you want to play this card, you don't want to play it on turn 1, you want to play it when it's already leveled up, so that it doesn't die to any man damage spell. Nobody wants to see chip dying, so you shouldn't allow that to happen. Then you bank 2 mana. At some point, like you have this 1 mana, and if your Blue Sentinel dies, you get 1 more mana, you have just 2 mana. In this total curve, you play Earth Elemental, Eye of the Rahurak, this will be your 4th landmark, so Earth Elemental can then attack. And this will also level up your Malphite. Then you can play Thronebreaker, lol. You can just play other cards at turn 6, like this card is not really viable. And I wouldn't really play it, but it's the intended curve, so I'm going to showcase it. And turn 7 you go for Malphite leveled up with the Eye of the Rahurak and the Unstoppable Force. That's why we were banking up 2 mana in the whole curve, basically. Nautilus is similar to the Maokai in a way that he also wants to have toss enabled, and there is basically one streamlined deep deck now in constructed, where you try to, or 2 deep decks I would say, where you try to go deep either as fast as possible or with a more controlish style. And Nautilus really likes Shadow Isles. It's not really that necessary because most sea monsters live in Bilgewater, but he still likes Shadow Isles just to have more access to toss cards, to sea scarabs for example. And my personal favorite curve for sea monsters is turn 1 bank 1 mana, turn 2 Lure of the Depths, into turn 3 Beasts of the Beast Below. And this will mean a turn 3 4/4, which is really strong. There's not many cards that can deal with a turn 3 4/4. And just continue with the Abyssal Eye turn 4, and then ideally the Devourer of Depths, but more likely like these toss cards, Drag Dredgers, Sea Scarab or Troll Hunters. Just fill out your curve, because you don't have triple Devourer of Depths in Expeditions. In Constructed you can just go for this full curve, but I don't even know if Constructed currently runs Lure of the Depths. And then you play Salvage and eventually level up your Nautilus by getting deep, Abyssal Eye drawing you cards, these toss mechanics drawing you cards. And I personally like this bank 1 lure into the Beast Below more than the 1 2 3 that's actually intended. But of course you can also play 1 2 3 if you want to flip your Nautilus as soon as possible. Sion got recently nerfed. He now starts at a 1/6, which also influences your curve. And the constructed way to play Sion is with PNC, with discards, and this is a very synergetic way. The intended one is like, first of all, you need Spill Around. You can just put them in any deck because it would just be a 7 mana 1/6 that would be also awful. And the intended curve would be like for Mono Noxus, bank 1, then you play a Grave Physician, discarding Fallen Rider, another Grave Physician, discarding Lost Soul, Trundle Revenant, etc. Or you can do this with like PNC, with the Solid Urchin, discarding Fallen Rider, and then some Dredger, discarding Lost Soul. So the PNC curve would be a little bit better, but it's very, very hard to get the PNC and Noxus together. So I'm going to focus on Mono Noxus. If you want to play Constructed, you should combine Scion with PNC for sure, Piltover and so on. If you look at this curve, this is basically the intended Mono Noxus curve. This would only leave him at 16 out of 35, but if you just go for a good Noxus deck, Legion Rearguard, Faring Glory Seeker, Rearguard Hopeful, plus Basilisk Rider, would already be at an 18 out of 35 without any epic to use up. So this is just what I like to go for if I want to draft Scion. Just get the good Noxus curve, and that will level him up by itself. Just play 2 more units, he's at 28, or like 2 more Glory Seekers and 1 more unit, and he's at basically flipped. So you can definitely make him work in expeditions, but I generally don't like the discard synergy. Tryndamere gave me a headache because first of all he's on expeditions, so they removed him not recently, like a few months ago. He used to have a really weird card pool with just some random poros and random stuff in it, and Tryndamere really doesn't have any build around. Like there is no card that in Freljord at least that synergizes him at all. He doesn't really have a good identity other than big guy who doesn't die. And I literally didn't find any good curve with him. And I looked at all constructed decks. There was like some Shadow Eyes versions, but yeah, like if you want to play Tryndamere, just play Feel the Rush and call it a day. Or like a Targon's Peak, for example. There isn't really any synergy, any build around intended for Tryndamere. Just ramp into him, get him out as a 10-10, and move on. He's on expeditions currently, so we don't know if there are any plans of bringing him back, if he will ever get a curve that works for him, or he will just stay the big guy that doesn't really have any support cards. Of course, he works with the 8 cost matters stuff, but it's still not really a good thing to build around. If you just want 8 cost matters, I would rather have a It That Stairs than a Tryndamere, to be honest. So the only way he really sees playing constructed is with Feel the Rush, Targon's Peak. And this leads us to the last one, Aurelion Sol. This is a most expensive champion in the game, and I would say he's flexible. Like you can play Aurelion Sol many different ways. He doesn't have one intended curve. He does have one intended curve, but there's no one right way to play him. You basically want to play him as a mid-range card in a slower mid-range deck. Aurelion Sol is not a control card or like your ultimate win condition in a control deck, because just paying 10 mana for Aurelion Sol takes your shield down for 1 turn. Your opponent is like, okay, I can play anything I want. This would be like playing chess, and you say your opponent, okay, I will win the game next turn, but I will turn around and you can mess up my pieces as much as you want. But if you don't kill me here, or if you don't mess up my pieces enough, then I will win. And this is how Aurelion Sol would be as a control card. And if possible, you want to be a little bit ahead or even on the board and not behind when you play Aurelion Sol. Because if you're behind, then your opponent will oftentimes find a way to kill you. The perfect curve for Aurelion Sol would be turn 1, bank 1 mana, Targon of course, turn 1, bank 1 mana, into Herald of Dragons, turn 2, into like White Flame, Fused Firebrand, Milious Vox, all reduced by 1, and then on turn 6 you will go for the Eclipse Dragon, and then can bring out a Aurelion Sol on turn 7, which is just the fastest you can do it. You can play like multiple Herald of Dragons, and it would be even faster, but in a realistic way, the fastest you can bring out Aurelion Sol is by turn 7. And of course you can combine him with Demacia and play Shyvana instead, play a Screeching Dragon instead. That's why I say he's pretty flexible. You can play him with Noxus, just having a good curve until the late game. And yeah, just what I said, play him as a mid-range card, play him as a mid-range finisher. You want to be even or ahead if you play Aurelion Sol. You don't want to be behind, because then you might just die off of that. Because if you have nothing better to do, you might as well try playing Aurelion Sol. Maybe they have nothing. But experienced players will definitely try to kill you on the turn you play Aurelion Sol. Okay, so this was exhausting. Now we've covered all of the different champions. I know I didn't make any separate slides for Soraka or Sejuani, but we have basically covered the intended curve for both of those. Soraka is covered under Tahm Kench, and Sejuani under the Gangplank section. Sejuani is also a good standalone card, so you don't really need to build around her that much. You can just put her in a deck, but if you want to build around her, she's best with Bilgewater and the direct damage ways. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I will drink some water after talking so much, and hope you will see you next time in our expeditions videos. And if you have any wishes, next week we of course start the Learning to Play series, so you can be excited for that. And yeah, hope you have a nice week. Check out our Discord, and thanks for watching.